Ever catch yourself staring in the mirror and really wondering who that is looking back at you?
Yeah.
That's what we're tackling today, this whole idea of self.
It's a big one.
It really is. And we're going deep, folks. Ancient philosophers, modern psychology, you name it.
And the thing is, there's so many different angles. I mean, there's no single answer.
That's true.
But by looking at how these ideas have evolved, we might just learn something new about ourselves along the way.
Totally. So buckle up, everybody, because we're time traveling back to ancient Greece for a minute.
Yeah.
Imagine togas, sandals philosophers debating big ideas in the marketplace.
Oh, and don't forget the drama. These thinkers did not hold back. But their ideas, still relevant today, they really set the stage for how we think about the self, even now.
Speaking of drama, let's talk about Socrates. Even if you've never read a word of philosophy, you know this guy.
All I know is that I know nothing.
Exactly. But it's one of those quotes that sounds really deep. What's the takeaway for us today?
You know, I think what's so cool about Socrates is that he believed real wisdom starts with admitting what you don't know. Like the journey of self-discovery, it never really ends.
It's definitely a more encouraging message than, here's all the answers.
Right.
But Socrates wasn't just about asking all the questions. He was also kind of obsessed with this idea of the psyche, the soul.
Oh, absolutely. That inner core. He thought that was the real us, not the masks we wear or the roles we play.
Okay, so how do we cultivate that inner core, that soul? What does Socrates say about that?
Well, for him, it wasn't about money or status. It was about pursuing goodness, truth, living a just life. Almost like he's saying, work on becoming a better person and the rest will work itself out.
Which, honestly, that's such a good reminder, especially today, right?
Right.
When we're constantly bombarded with all these messages about external validation.
It's so true.
But we can't talk about Socrates without mentioning his star pupil, Plato.
Oh, yeah.
This guy took the idea of the soul and ran with it.
Yeah.
He created this whole framework, body, mind, and soul.
And it's a framework that, believe it or not, we still kind of think about today. Our body, it's connected to the physical world, right? We experience things through our senses, pleasure, pain.
Right.
But then there's our mind, always striving, always searching for meaning and truth beyond all that.
It's like our body is here in the day-to-day, and then our mind is like, what's out there?
Yeah, like reaching for the stars.
I like that.
Yeah.
But then there's that third piece of the puzzle, the soul.
Ah, yes, the soul.
What did Plato think about that?
So Plato believed the soul was our true eternal essence, like the part of us that exists even after the body's gone. He saw it as this pure, unchanging entity, separate from this constantly changing world.
Wow, it's like saying we're more than just our physical bodies, more than just our thoughts.
Right.
There's this deeper part of us that connects to something, well, bigger than ourselves.
And it's an idea that continues to resonate with people even today. I mean, it's hard to deny that there's something special about that idea of a soul.
It's true. It's true. But the cool thing about philosophy is that it's this ongoing conversation.
Right.
And then comes along Aristotle, Plato's own student, with his own unique spin on things.
Oh, Aristotle. He was all over the place in the best way possible. I mean, this guy made contributions to logic, ethics, biology, physics, you name it. And he had his own unique spin on the soul. In fact, he thought there were 3 different types of souls.
3 souls. Okay, now we're getting really complicated.
Yeah.
Tell me more about these 3 souls.
Okay, so imagine like a pyramid, right?
Yeah.
At the bottom, you've got the nutritive soul. It's
Yeah.
the most basic one. It's that life force that allows living things to grow, reproduce, basically stay alive. Aristotle thought even plants had this kind of soul.
So even my almost dead houseplant has a soul.
There you go. It's that life force within it.
I never thought about it like that.
Exactly. Now, moving up that pyramid a bit, we get to what's called the sensitive soul. This is where things get a little more interesting. This is all about the senses, our emotions, desires. It's what allows animals, including us, to experience the world in a much richer way.
So that's where my love for puppy videos comes in.
There you go. Exactly.
Candid.
But here's the really cool part. At the very tippy top of this soul pyramid, we have the rational soul. This one's a game changer. This is what sets humans apart, that ability to think critically, make decisions.
Oh, so is that voice in my head that's always second-guessing everything?
There you go.
That's it.
Got it. Okay. That's your rational soul working overtime. But Aristotle truly believed this was what made us human. It gives us language, morality, it lets us reflect on our own existence.
Okay, that's amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
But I feel like we got to fast forward a little bit because we have to talk about St. Augustine.
Okay.
He was centuries after these guys, but still super influenced by those Greek philosophers.
Oh, yeah. Especially Plato.
Yes.
Yeah, big fan.
So Augustine took those ancient ideas about the soul, right? But then he combined them with his own beliefs to create a pretty powerful vision of the self.
Oh, absolutely. He was all about free will. That God gave us this incredible ability to choose between right and wrong, good and evil. And through those choices, we shape our souls. We shape our destinies.
So it's not enough just to have a soul.
Right.
You have to make choices that are actually going to cultivate it.
You got it.
Oh, man. High stakes.
High stakes. And I think this idea of taking responsibility, that inner struggle that we all feel, it's something we can all relate to.
It's true. It's like that whole angel and devil on your shoulder thing.
Exactly.
Except maybe a little less obvious. I don't know.
Yeah.
So we've got this soul, but we're constantly making choices that are shaping it. A lot of pressure.
Right. I think that's what makes this whole self-discovery thing so fascinating, though. We're caught between what we want and, what we think we should be doing. It's this lifelong process of learning and growing, trying to figure it all out.
And what I found amazing is how these thinkers from like thousands of years ago are still so relevant today. It's like we're all still wrestling with the same big questions.
It's true. Who am I?
Yeah.
What's my purpose?
Yeah.
Why am I here? And those questions, they definitely don't get any easier as we move into the modern era.
That is the perfect segue because that is exactly where we are going next. Get ready for some serious mind benders as we dive into the world of modern thought.
Talk about a change of scenery. We've gone from like togas and sandals in ancient Greece to powdered wigs and the Enlightenment.
It's a whole new wardrobe department, but that question, who am I? It's still front and center.
Oh, yeah.
We've got some heavy hitters in this area, like René Descartes.
Oh, of course.
I think, therefore I am. I feel like everyone's heard that one. But how does that play into this whole concept of self?
Well, Descartes, he wanted to find something, some truth that was undeniable. And he realized that even if he doubted everything, even his own body, there was still something there doing the doubting.
Okay, so it's not about what we think, but that we are even capable of thinking.
Exactly. I think, therefore I am. That's the self, the mind. And he saw this as totally separate from the physical body.
It's so interesting how that idea is still debated today, especially with like technology and artificial intelligence, all that blurring the lines even more.
Oh, absolutely.
But okay, so we have Descartes, and then comes John Locke, right? He kind of flipped the script.
Yeah, Locke was less concerned with proving we exist and more curious about the what of who we are, right?
Okay.
He believed we're born as these blank slates. Our experiences shape us.
So it's nurture over nature then?
He would say so, absolutely.
Oh.
Knowledge comes from our senses, and that shapes who we become.
Yeah.
He was really big on how society influences us, like economics, too. Think about it. Our opportunities, our social circles, even our sense of what's possible.
That's so true. I mean, your environment shapes your reality in a lot of ways.
Big time.
But then, here comes David Hume, always up for a good philosophical debate. He's got this bundle theory, and it sounds kind of harmless at first, but it's actually pretty wild.
Right. This is where things get a little funky. Hume was all about challenging those assumptions, and he really took aim at this idea of a fixed, unchanging self.
Okay, so no more statues.
No statues. He said, what if the self is more like a bundle of all these different perceptions, feelings, experiences, all kind of bundled together?
It's like a kaleidoscope. It's constantly shifting, changing.
Yes, exactly. There's no like underlying me holding it all together, just this constant flow of experience.
Okay, that one's going to take some processing. But on that note, we can't talk about the modern self without talking about the OG himself, Sigmund Freud.
I mean, we'd be remiss not to talk about Freud.
Right.
He practically invented psychoanalysis.
He did.
And his ideas about the self, they're still so relevant. I mean, they're everywhere. Books, movies, even how we talk about ourselves every day.
He really changed the game, especially with that whole concept of the unconscious.
The unconscious, it's like he unearthed this whole hidden world inside us, right? This place where all these thoughts and desires, memories, they're all bubbling beneath the surface, influencing us in ways we don't even realize.
Yeah, it's a little creepy when you actually think about it.
It's true. It's like this secret world inside your own head.
Yeah.
And Freud would say those unconscious drives, they have a huge impact on our behaviors.
So much drama.
Oh, so much drama. And of course, he gave us these now household terms: ad, ego, superego.
Okay, break those down for me. It's like a boxing ring in my mind right now.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So you've got it's like that inner child, right? wants what it wants when it wants it. Give me that cookie now. Then you've got the superego on the other side. That's like the strict parent, all about rules, no cookies before dinner, and don't you even think about hitting your brother.
And then stuck in the middle is the poor ego.
Exactly. The ego's the mediator, just trying to keep everybody happy, satisfy those urges in a way that doesn't, get us arrested. It's a tough job.
It's a really tough job.
Mm-hmm.
But Freud didn't stop there.
Oh, no.
He took this idea of the unconscious and he ran with it.
Oh.
He was talking about childhood development, sexuality, dreams.
Everything.
He was like, let's go there.
Let's go there. Everything's on the table.
It's like he gave us this new language to talk about those messy parts of ourselves.
Absolutely.
The stuff we usually try to keep hidden. But Freud was like, let's shine a light on it.
Yeah, exactly. And, while some of his ideas might seem a little outdated now, his work is still incredibly influential. He really shifted the way we think about the human mind.
For sure.
Yeah.
But for this deep dive, we got to keep moving. We're going to shift gears a little bit now because we can't talk about the self without talking about our relationships with other people.
Oh, 100%.
It's not all in our heads, right?
No, not at all. We're social creatures. We're not just driven by these internal forces. The social world shapes who we are. And that brings us to sociology.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, sociologists, they're all about how we behave in groups. And they were really interested in how our sense of self, it actually comes from our interactions with others.
So we're not born with a self. We develop it through social interaction.
That's what they would say. One of the big names here is George Herbert Mead. He called this the social self. He argued that even language itself, something so fundamental to who we are, is a social creation.
That's a really cool way to think about it. So it's not just what others tell us about ourselves, but also how we think they see us.
That's a great point. And that brings us to this other sociologist, Charles Horton Cooley. He came up with this concept of the looking glass self.
Oh, yeah, I like that one.
It's a good one, right? So we're constantly adjusting ourselves, our behaviors, how we present to the world, based on how we imagine other people see us.
Okay, that explains a lot about my teenage years because it was all about what other people were thinking.
Oh, absolutely. And with social media now, it's like that's been amplified times 1,000. We're curating our online selves, trying to project a certain image.
It's like we're all actors on a global stage now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the perfect transition to talk about Erving Goffman, who was all about this idea of the self as a performance. He had this dramaturgical approach.
Oh, Goffman's the best. He said social life is basically a performance. We're all actors, adjusting our behavior depending on the audience.
Oh, 100%. It's like at work versus with my friends, on a date, on social media.
Exactly.
It's like a different costume change.
Totally. Goffman called it impression management. And we use all these tools, right? Body language, our clothes, what we say, what we don't say. Even our Instagram filters.
Exactly. We're always trying to convey a certain image.
It's exhausting. But it also makes you wonder, under all those masks, is there even a real me,
That is the question, isn't it? I mean, do we have this one true self? Or are we always changing? It's a question psychologists have been grappling with for ages.
Well, let's go to the lab, shall we? See what those researchers have to say about it all.
Let's do it. And I think a good place to start might be with behaviorism.
Okay, so tell me about behaviorism.
So this was a school of thought that came about and kind of shook things up a bit. They were all about focusing on observable behaviors. Forget the unconscious. They were all about show me what you do.
Actions speak louder than words or thoughts.
Exactly. They believed that our behaviors are mostly shaped by our environment. Things like conditioning, think Pavlov's dogs.
Ring the bell, the dog salivates.
Exactly. So are we really that different? Are we just responding to rewards and punishments in our environment?
I mean, hopefully it's a little more nuanced than that, right?
I think so. I certainly hope so. And to be fair, while behaviorism was really important, a lot of people felt like it was a bit too simplistic. I mean, what about creativity or abstract thought? It didn't really account for that.
Which brings us back to all those internal forces, right?
Right, back to the internal world.
That Freud was so fascinated by.
Exactly. And, while not all of Freud's theories have stood the test of time, there's no doubt he got people thinking about the power of the unconscious. But then came the humanists. A little more optimistic, you could say.
Okay, tell me more about the humanists.
So thinkers like Carl Rogers, they really emphasize this idea that we all have this drive to be our best selves. It's not just about rewards and punishments or unconscious urges, but this desire to grow, to reach our full potential.
I like that. So where does this leave us? I mean, is it one unified self or do we have multiple selves?
That is a great question. There's a lot of debate about that. On one hand, we have this feeling of continuity, right? This idea that it's still me over time. But we also know we behave differently depending on the situation, who we're with.
So which one is the real me?
Right. Who is that real me? And that's where someone like D.W. Winnicott comes in.
Okay.
He talked about the true self and the false self.
So like masks that we put on.
Kind of. He said that sometimes we develop these false selves to cope with the pressures of society, or maybe to protect our more vulnerable, authentic selves.
Oh, I like that. So is the goal then to just always be our true selves? Is that even possible?
That's a good question. I mean, it's probably a process, right?
Yeah.
Learning to be more authentic, more comfortable in our own skin. But we also can't forget the power of our environment, you know?
Which brings us to, I think, a perfect person to talk about. Albert Bandura,
Okay, yeah, Bandura.
with his social cognitive theory. This is the Bobo doll guy, right?
Yes. The Bobo doll experiments,
Yeah.
he basically showed how much we learn from watching other people.
So we're all just copying each other?
Well, it's not quite that simple. He also said we're not just passive imitators. We process information, we make choices, we have some agency in all of this.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better.
Right, we're not just robots. But I think it's important to remember that we've been talking about this from, a mostly Western perspective.
Right.
The individual as separate, autonomous.
Right.
But in Eastern philosophies like Confucianism, the self is much more relational.
Oh, that's interesting. So how do they see it differently?
Well, they would say the self is defined by its connection to others, your roles in your family, community, society as a whole. Harmony is super important.
It's like less about finding yourself and more about understanding your place in the world.
Yes, exactly. And it shows how much our culture shapes how we see ourselves, how we see the world. But no matter what, we're experiencing it all through our physical selves.
Right. At the end of the day, we can't escape our bodies.
We can't. And that physical self, it really shapes who we become, especially during those teenage years.
Oh, yeah. All those changes.
Right. Puberty, social pressure, trying to fit in. It can be tough to navigate.
It can be brutal out there.
Yeah.
And speaking of tough topics, I think we should touch on the sexual self a little bit. It's a big part of who we are, but it's often, kind of taboo to talk about.
It's true. It's often very personal
Yeah?
and complex. But it's about so much more than just sex itself. It's about our desires, our boundaries, our values.
Totally. I think it's about respect, too.
100%. Respecting each other's experiences,
Yeah,
creating a space where we can talk about these things openly and honestly.
absolutely. But I never thought we'd be talking about our stuff in this whole self conversation.
Yeah. Right. But it's interesting. Our possessions, they can reflect who we are, or at least who we want people to think we are.
Right. Our clothes, our cars, the books we read.
Everything. It's like we're curating these identities through our stuff.
We are, especially in the age of social media.
Oh, 100%.
But, it does make you think, right? Can we ever really separate our true selves from all of that, from the material world?
It's a good question. Maybe it's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Enjoying what we have, but not letting it define us.
Right. It's the thing you can't take it with you.
Exactly. But speaking of things that endure, maybe we should end on the spiritual self.
Yes. Let's do that.
This is the part of us that seeks meaning, purpose, maybe even connection to something bigger than ourselves.
It's that sense of wonder. And it can show up in so many ways.
It really can. For some people, it's religion, but it can be through art or nature or music or meditation.
Or whatever connects you to that. Like
Right, to that something
something bigger.
that reminds you there's more to life than just the everyday grind.
I like that. So after this whirlwind tour of the self, from ancient Greece to modern psychology, where do we even go from here?
Honestly, I think that's the beauty of it. There's no one right answer. The journey is the destination, right?
It really is. We are all works in progress. It's about asking the questions, being open to new ideas.
And maybe learning a little bit more about ourselves along the way.
I love that. Well, on that note, dear listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mystery of the self. Until next time.